Not sure why this is, but there is one mitzvah that people seem to harp on and think it's ridiculous. More times than I care to think about, people have said to me, bringing my utensils to the mikvah before I use them, right? Tefillah, what we call tefillas kelim, what the locals here call dipping, right? We call it immersing tefillas kelim. Stupidest mitzvah I ever heard of. Again, I'm not sure what we have against this mitzvah, but we'll try and take a few moments and explain, right? Why is it that we immerse our vessels before we use them? Now, the source for this is actually in this week's parsha. Right after they go to war with Midian, they take the spoils from the war, but right, included in the spoils of war are going to be vessels that are not kosher. Right, they're certainly used for treif by the Midianites, owned by non-Jews, and we have to purify them. We have to make sure they're usable for the Jewish people. And therefore, we read, Vayomer Elazar HaKohen al Anshe Tzava Ba'im LaMilchama. Elazar the Kohen says to the people of the army who are coming back from war, Zot Chukata Torah Shetzivah Hashem Moshe. This is the chok of the Torah that Hashem commanded Moshe. Achet hazahav ve'hakesef ha'nechoshet ve'barzel, steel, oferet, right? The gold, the silver, the copper, the metal, the tin, etc. Kol davar asher yavo ba'esh ta'avir ba'esh v'taher. Anything that comes, was used on fire has to be purged by fire. That's what we call koshering kalim, right? Making sure it's kosher, purging the treif. Ach b'mei nida yitchata, with the waters of the nida, the mikvah, they will become, cleansed. Chol asher lo yavo ba'esh, anything that doesn't come in contact with the fire, doesn't need to be koshered. Ta'aviru b'mai, that passes through the water. So there's a fascinating argument as to whether this is a mitzvah from the Torah of Tfilas Kelim or a mitzvah from the rabbis based on these psukim. Either way, this is the source for immersing our vessels in the Torah. And I want to highlight just one textual oddity which maybe holds the key to the entire mitzvah of Tfilas Kelim. I read it to you, but I didn't highlight it. Now we're going to highlight it. Vayomer Elazar HaKohen, Elazar, the Kohen, says to the people, these are the laws that Hashem commanded Moshe. That should throw us because the entire Torah is filled with, Hashem says to Moshe, and Moshe tells the people, Hashem said, Hashem Moshe more. Hashem tells Moshe, relays the information to the people. That is the Torah. They learned the Torah from Moshe Rabbeinu. Why here, specifically by immersing vessels, by Tfilas Kelim, do we have Vayomer Elazar HaKohen? Elazar the Kohen doesn't have many speaking roles in the Chumash. And we see a few psukim earlier that Moshe and Elazar come to greet them. So Moshe is there. Moshe is present. It should be Moshe teaching the people like it is throughout the rest of the Chumash. Why Elazar HaKohen? So I think that the answer is, and the Ibn Ezra, this is the position of the Ibn Ezra, but it's a beautiful answer. He says it is Elazar HaKohen who speaks to teach us that immersing your vessels is included in the laws of purity and sanctity, of tahara and kedusha. That is the realm of the Kohen, Moshe Rabbeinu is teaching the Jews everything, So the fact that Moshe says it's not going to tell you anything about the laws. When the Kohen gets up, when Elazar HaKohen gets up, that means it's in his domain, In the domain of the priesthood, the domain of the kahuna, is kedusha and tahara. It is holiness and it is purity, What does that mean for immersing our vessels? It means that everything that is related to our eating of food really belongs in the realm of purity and sanctity, right? We shouldn't eat like animals, right? We need to, even the act of eating, the very materialistic, right, base act of eating, which we need to live, is meant to be elevated into a world of holiness and sanctity, purity, right? We need to sit there and appreciate the food comes from Hashem. And when we do that, we transform the act of eating into a religious act, an act of Kedusha and Tara. I've said this many, many, many times. That is why we make brachos, right? To bring Hashem into the picture, to elevate this very material, gashmi act into an act that belongs in the realm of the kahuna, of Kedusha and of Tahara, purity, of sanctity and purity. And in order to take this to its extreme, even the plates that you're using, the silverware, should they be made of any type of metal, right, have to be immersed. They have to be purified to teach us that when we eat on these plates, it's an act of purity. When we eat with this fork and the spoon and the knife, when we drink from the cup, all of that is elevating. Every aspect of our eating, right, is elevated to the world of purity and sanctity, and that is why we have tefillas kelim. That is why we immerse our vessels. The first thing that we do before we come to eat, before we've even bought the food, is to remind ourselves, even the act of eating belongs in the world, the realm of Kedusha and Tara. Shabbat Shalom.